Hello all. This story has two endings. It's almost like a choose-your-own-adventure scenario. Please refer to the description to select the ending you prefer. This is We Were But Revenants by Jordan Long. The colony has been running for over 10 years now, but from the grime that covered some areas, it appeared to be older. When there wasn't any precipitation to wash it away from time to time, filth tends to layer up. I don't mind though, since my entire life was filth and grime at this point. If all the propaganda the United Colonies Association wanted us to believe was true, I should be thanking my lucky stars that I had escaped Earth. But even if the water was toxic and the sun blocked behind curtains of smog, there was at least a few moments when the light shone through. I wasn't going to die of lung cancer at 40 though, so I guess that's a plus. The beacon in my pocket was beeping, and I'm sure I'm not the only one on this android's trail, but I still take a second to close my eyes and lean my head back, imagining the warmth of the sun on my face. It's not enough. It never is. Once Earth became nearly unlivable and the wealthy were ready to flee, the colonies were planned. Mars first, and then Ganymede. At that point, there weren't enough willing workers to risk their lives putting these plans into action, especially with a pretty obvious undertone that it was going to be the upper class that got the first choice of living arrangements. But the sand was quickly running out of the hourglass for Earth, so something had to be done. It wasn't completely unlivable back home, but life expectancy was low, and quality of life was rather abysmal. Lung cancer, melanomas, and anything else awful and debilitating ran rampant, and if the land wasn't barren, then it was flooding. Terraforming Mars or any other planet or moon was a pipe dream, but these colonies worked well enough. A neglected, grubby terrarium for the human animal. Problem was, I had two sisters back home, but I was so close to being able to bring them here where there was a chance for them to live a full-length life. It wasn't so bad in the wealthier areas, still a sad facsimile of the Earth we should have preserved. But Annie was smart enough to be of use to the Colonies Association. Maybe as a scientist or something. And if there could ever be a perfect soldier, it was going to be Nina. They were only 15, and they had been only 12 when I saw them last. Twins just like Richie and I had been. I was doing my best as a glorified android bounty hunter, but sometimes I wondered if there would be anything left of me by the time they arrived. What did it even matter though? I was the only one left. If I could pave the way for them to have even an inkling of happiness, then I would take whatever rest was granted to me without complaint, be it in a home with my sisters or in the ground. Because again, what did it matter? Richie and I had been left with the girls when our parents died, but he had disappeared not soon after. Whether he had been driven mad by grief or simply didn't want the responsibility, I guess I'll never know. But it had left me little choice on my path of life. I hadn't always been just the face behind a pistol. I had dreams too, at one point in my life. But in the end, all that mattered was what I could provide for others. My life is forfeit, albeit willing forfeit. When it was clear there wasn't enough workers to build the two colonies, the leading robotics companies in the world set to work creating a solution. They were hailed as heroes for their quick turnarounds and effective robotic workers. But there was a secret to these metal laborers, one that I had to disconnect myself from, or I'd never be able to do my job. It was a tale as old as time. Once the domes were completed, the androids would either be dismantled or repurposed for work inside the colonies. But after years of working out in the vacuum of space, they were said to have malfunctioned, to the point it was better to scrap them. Which is where I came in, because no matter how they tried to raise the androids from the colonies, a few always slipped through their fingers. It turns out they didn't want to die. Rumor said that it was an organized uprising, some sort of ghost in the machine awakening in them and demanding fair treatment. But of course, that was ridiculous, wasn't it? They were only machines, weren't they? You never want to view yourself as the bad guy, but once you've done enough unforgivable things, the reality sets in. I've been a lot of things in my life. Daughter, sister, lover, twin, and now murderer, of a sort anyway. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" the teacher would ask us. I think about that question a lot. At one time, I think I would have liked to be an artist. Now, I would like to be anything to anyone, instead of the billionth cog in a machine that never even knew I existed. An image of the sky, how it would have appeared on Earth decades ago, was projected on the inside of the dome, although I couldn't imagine why it would matter at this time of the night. There was a curfew that I was obstinately breaking, and I highly doubted it was playing for me. The alley where I finally found the android was so far off the beaten path that the general public saw that I actually felt a twinge of apprehension. Sometimes the androids fought back, and other times they didn't, but if this one managed to overpower me, I probably wouldn't be found for weeks. The mechanics of how these metal men functioned, besides the obvious, was beyond me, and while I could clearly see the gears and wires making up the android, there was something in the way they moved that always gave me a moment of panic. "It's a person," my brain would insist. The android blinked empty, luminous eyes back at me as I raised the pistol. Its eyes. Its. Not his. The blink was slow and deliberate, exhausted even, and it made the pit of my stomach gape wider than ever. "I know you," it said, voice sounding like thousands of pins clicking across resonant steel. "If you give me your identification number, it will keep me from having to tear your head off to get it once you're dead," I replied. "Death implies a previous state of living. Am I alive, Rose?" I faltered, the barrel of the gun wavering in my shock, but the android didn't try to flee. It just watched me with those bright, lifeless eyes, and shock skittered up my spine. The feeling reminded me of those centipedes that my brother and I used to watch run across the concrete floor of my grandmother's basement. "Ask me," it droned. "Ask me who I was." My grandmother was dead, along with everyone else that had ever called me by that name. The basement was filled in with dirt. "I don't give a fuck," I told it, chin tilted back. "What's your identification number?" It kept fucking blinking, almost patiently. One of those biological behaviors that no lab had been able to successfully burn out. "Rose." I clicked the safety off. "When you pry my brain from this machine, will you see yourself there in it?" Acid rose up my throat, but I swallowed it back down. Those were the moments I was sure would send me to hell eventually. When I had to force open the metal skull, work my fingers under the human brain and detach it. The wet pops and snaps of it disconnecting from the android's mainframe, stuck in my memory forever. It was only the ones that fought me I needed to debrain, because without the identification number stamped on the inside of the skull, the company I worked for wouldn't come to pick up the shell of the thing, and I wouldn't get the credit. They had promised me that the brains were just being used as a type of computer, a way to have the androids do the intricate work that the artificial intelligence could never quite grasp. There's nothing left of the person the brain used to belong to, I had been told. When the androids screamed for their mothers as I put them down, mechanical voices echoing into my soul, I knew they were lying. I would chant my sisters' names to drown the screeches out when it happened. Annie, Nina, Annie, Nina. Last chance, I forced out. What are you getting from existing in some back alley anyway? It was then the android did something I had never seen one do before. It smiled, rubber lips crinkling up while the rest of the face stayed disturbingly still. Maybe I was waiting to see you, to say that I'm sorry. I pulled in a shaking breath. Is this some mind game? It was the longest conversation I had ever had with one, but something about it was pulling at me deep in the recesses of my mind. I couldn't keep my mouth shut. This is why there was so little left of me. These tiny human moments that all but scream consciousness, intelligence, emotion, grief. But I had 2 sisters to take care of. Remember when you were 8 and you got lost in the woods behind the house chasing that old barn cat? I found you then, when no one else could because we were tethered, Rose. It's how you found me now. It would have almost been easier to turn the gun on myself in the second, rather than let the truth absorb into me, forcing itself into the cracks of my sanity. It grew there, line vines splitting apart a brick wall. Distantly, I was aware the gun had clattered to the ground. Richie? My voice cracked, brittle. Maybe, he said, the strange smile stuck in place. I didn't realize who I was until I saw you. But I think that's who I am. Was. Why did you... I could barely draw an air to speak. How did you... He shook his head. Another one of those achingly human gestures. It's not important. It is! I screamed. The sound tore out of me like something living, raw and anguished. You're... The horror of it all is almost too much to swallow, my reality continuing to crack at the seams. I thought you were dead. I was. Aren't I now? It wasn't Richie's voice, or his eyes, or anything that was truly his besides his words, but somehow it was enough. It was easy, after the pain of his departure faded, to imagine Richie living in some shithole apartment back on Earth. But this was something else. A nightmare. My twin, my apparent mirror image, was nothing more than the scraps of his personality left, after whatever he had been put through to get to this point. Are you? I asked right back. I was desperate to know. Are you dead? A few more blinks. The smile fell. Mostly, I think. Are you going to put me down now, Rose? I think I've been waiting for you. I'm only hunting androids to bring Nina and Annie here, to save them. I never wanted to be a murderer, Richie. The compulsion to explain myself was so strong that I couldn't stop it from spilling out. I watched him kneel, his false joints clinking and groaning, and pick up my pistol. As if on autopilot, I held out my hands and let him place it there. I felt only the slightest brush of his hand, and it was frigid. Richie rattled off his identification number, and after a moment's hesitation, I pulled out my datapad and typed it in. We looked at each other afterward. Us, who used to be reflections, now more like the shape of a person and the shadow it cast. With the horrible truth of what happened to my twin here in my face, there was nothing left of me but a husk, a revenant, walking upright. Ending 1. Rose, I loved you all until the end, he said as I raised the gun. I knew logically that his voice couldn't contain genuine emotions, but it seemed to me like there was resignation in his tone. Is this what you want? I breathed. Richie shrugged one shoulder, and for a brief second it was like his flesh and blood body was right in front of me. The gesture was so achingly familiar. I don't want anything. I think I only try to survive because it's the most basic instinct we have. But I feel no sorrow in facing death. I do feel contentment, though, seeing your face once more. I'm glad I was able to tell you what I thought about you and the girls before my first death. And my second, now. I nodded. To earn a ticket to bring someone to Ganymede, we had to put down 10 androids. So for my sisters, I needed 20. I was at 19, which meant... You're my last kill, I told Richie, enough resolve reigning over me that I was able to hold the pistol steady now. After this, I can bring the girls over. You'll be saving them. I wish he would have tried to smile again, or give any indication to make me think that this second death would give him some sort of peace. But he didn't. Richie's final words were, saving them, but destroying you? Yeah, I breathed. It was an ache I thought I had put to bed that I felt then. An ache for my brother, for my home, my grandmother's basement, the planet where the bones of my ancestors laid. When I fired, killing Richie for the second time and my humanity for the first, I was glad that even through my tears, my aim was true. Ending 2. Go, I said woodenly. I can't do this, Richie, just go. He was quiet for a second. If it isn't you, it will be someone else. I shook my head in denial. What number is this for you, Rose? 10 android kills for a ticket to Ganymede, isn't it? How close are you? I wouldn't tell him. There was no way I could tell him he would be my last. The words were like ash on my tongue. I might be the last one of them left on Ganymede. What then? He asked in that terrible clockwork voice. I'll figure something out, I insist. What if there are no more chances, Rose? Put me down. This time, I threw the pistol, and it bounced off the walls of the alleyway until it lay still, yards away from us. Another scream was building up in me, red and furious and full of sorrow. I knew the reality of it, and if I didn't put Richie down, then I might never get my sisters here with me. But life has already asked too much of me to expect this too. I would find another way. I had to find another way. I could only choke down the scream for so long until it burst forth in the form of words. Get the fuck out of here. This would have never happened if you had just not left us all, if you hadn't ran away. I loved you all until the end, Rose. All I wanted was to come home before I died the first time. Bullshit. You left, and it took my life and my body and every moral I ever had to pick up your slack. And now you want my soul, too? Because if I kill you in this alley, Richie, I die too. I wish he would have given me anything then. A frown, a mocking smile, or even reached a hand out to me. But he didn't. It was just more infuriatingly slow blinks. Nothing else on his cold, blank face. There was no drama to it. And I guess it must have been some small iota of his human brain forcing him to keep finding ways to survive. Richie didn't even tell me goodbye as he turned to leave, back into the shadows, our meeting brief enough to almost be a fever dream. I should have shot him in the back, because I had misjudged. Watching the shell that held the scraps of what had been my brother disappear, I sank to my knees on the filthy ground, and my soul died anyway. I couldn't even bring myself to cry.